Hello everybody, this is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop, proud owner of the world's smallest sonic screwdriver. Take a look at this thing. It's very small. That's all I gotta say about that, and yes, in case you guys are asking, I did shave since the last episode, so you're welcome. But anyways, it's finally happening. It took a bit of a while, but I am now finally talking about this particular show on It Came From England. It's one of the most well-known shows to come out of the UK, and ever since the 60s, it's still been going on to this day. That show would be Doctor Who. And the first episode of the series premiered around November 23rd, 1963, which was like almost 56 years ago, so that's quite a long time. And it continued for quite a while up until originally around December 6th, 1989. And then the show 16 years later, around 2005, March 26th to be exact, got revived, and to this day, the show's still going on. Now, since there are quite a bunch of different incarnations of the Doctor over the past 50-some years, I feel like, talking about all of them in one video would just take hours and hours. So, to make things even for each Doctor, I am going to dedicate one episode each talking about them. And of course, I'm starting off with the first one being the First Doctor, played by William Hartnell. Now, the first episode, as I already mentioned previously, aired November 23rd, 1963. And then the last episode to feature William Hartnell playing the Doctor came out around October 29th, 1966. So, Hartnell played the Doctor for pretty much the first 3 years of the show's lifespan. Big lifespan. Now, the format of the Doctor Who episodes, at least only when it comes to the classic series, since, well, I'm talking about the classic series right now. I have yet to watch any of the new series episodes, and yeah, that'll be quite a while until I review or talk about anything related to that. But when it comes to like classic Doctor Who episodes, the format goes like this. So you got a main story, otherwise known as a serial. I don't know. I think it's pronounced surreal. Correct me if I'm wrong. And normally this serial would go on for multiple episodes. Each episode would normally be around 25 minutes or so. So, say for example, there's a 4-part serial, and each individual part or episode's like 25 minutes long. That's 100 minutes long, so yeah, that's the kind of stuff, production-wise, that you'll expect to see from the classic Doctor Who series. And now on to the premise of the show, at least for the First Doctor era. So pretty much the Doctor is a time and space traveling being. He's not considered a human. He's like considered a completely different species altogether, but like has the physical appearance of a human. But he travels in what looks to be a police box, but it's actually under the name TARDIS, which stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space. But the Doctor doesn't travel alone. Oh no. Over the course of many years throughout the Doctor Who series, the Doctor not only changes himself physically and personality-wise, but like also his companions change over time. And I'll just go over all of the First Doctor's companions from like the earliest ones to the latest ones. I will start off with the first 3 that he had, which were Susan Foreman, Ian Chesterton, and Barbara Wright. Let's start off by talking about Susan Foreman. Now, Susan Foreman is pretty much, on the show, at least during the Hartnell era, is considered the Doctor's granddaughter. And she was pretty much like, not only one of the first companions of the Doctor, but like, one of the first companions of the Doctor to actually be considered a relative of them. And normally, a lot of the time, the Doctor doesn't have like any other relatives mentioned in the show, but Susan was one of the few exceptions. And then the Doctor's other two original companions were Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, who were both teachers of Susan Foreman. And this leads me to pretty much, I guess, talk about the first episode of the series, An Unearthly Child. So, premise of this episode, Ian and Barbara realize Susan's not like a typical student, so they pretty much just follow her to where she lives, and as soon as they find out that she apparently lives in a police box, they look inside, they find out it could travel in time and space, and they discover the Doctor, and that was how both of them pretty much came along with the Doctor and Susan on all of their time and space adventures. And not too long afterwards in the episode, they later shift the focus onto the Doctor and his companions traveling to the Stone Age and encountering cave people, and the cave people wanted them to help them make fire because they don't have the ability to make fire. Yeah, definitely not the kind of thing you would expect from like the first episode of a time-traveling show. So the first season of the show pretty much had 8 surreals. If you do individual episodes, that would be 42. And then the second season came around, and after the second surreal, which by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, but like, the first season, of course, not only introduced the Doctor and, you know, his original companions, but it also introduced one of the show's most well-known villains, if not the most well-known villain in Doctor Who, and those would be the Daleks. So the Daleks, in a nutshell, are pretty much just violent cyborg alien creatures that want to destroy inferior races of creatures compared to them. They always see themselves as the superior race in the universe and would stop at nothing to try and destroy other races across, you know, the universe. Which is really funny because, according to the creator of the Daleks, pretty much the guy who was responsible for writing the first couple episodes related to them, a guy by the name of Terry Nation, he stated that, like, the Daleks were sort of inspired by Nazis. Which I can definitely see that from, you know, how they act towards other races, seeing themselves as superior. It makes a lot of sense when you really think about it. A little bit dark. Which, now that I got the Daleks' backstory out of the way, now it's time to talk about the episode I was going to talk about, the second surreal, of the second season. And that would be the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Now, this episode was the first episode for a couple things. It was the first episode where an enemy of the Doctor appears again. Like, none of the other previous enemies from the first season, like, appeared again, at least not to my knowledge. But in the episode, the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan all end up in the 22nd century of Earth, and during that time, the Daleks have invaded Earth, and the Doctor and his companions, you know, work with like a human resistance group to try and stop the Daleks from mining the Earth's core in order to pilot the Earth through space. But not only that, this was the first episode of Doctor Who to have one of the companions leave, and that companion was Susan. Now, from what I've heard, the main reason why Susan was sort of removed from the show after that episode was because the writers, you know, I guess weren't really that impressed with writing the character. Carol Ann Ford, the actress that plays Susan, was sort of dissatisfied with the way they characterized Susan as sort of like the typical scream, scared kind of girl character, so that's why Susan didn't appear in any other official episodes afterwards. And then the next episode afterwards, under the title The Rescue, introduced a new companion who would travel along with the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara for another couple episodes, and her name was Vicky, who I guess was sort of considered to be sort of like Susan, except like not like Susan, pretty much. More able to hold off on her own, all that kind of stuff. She was on the show up until around the early third season, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's continue onwards. And then another episodes go by in season 2, and then that was until the 8th surreal of that season, called The Chase. Another one that featured the Daleks. This time the Daleks made their own time machine to try and go after the Doctor and his companions. And that episode was the last episode to have Ian and Barbara as the Doctor's companions. They decided to test out the Daleks' time machine after they defeated the Daleks. So they used the time machine, they traveled back to 1963 London, and they've lived out the rest of their lives there. And yeah, what's really funny, Ian and Barbara weren't supposed to leave Doctor Who after that episode, but I guess the writers decided at the last moment to have the characters leave the show, since that time machine that the Daleks made was sort of like their first chance of opportunity to go back to where they belong, so I can see that being the reason why. And The Chase introduced another companion to the show under the name Stephen Taylor, who was sort of Ian and Barbara's replacement, especially Ian, because I didn't mention this when I was talking about like the characters, but Ian was sort of like the action male character. Another thing I forgot to mention, the Doctor, at least Hartnell's interpretation of the Doctor, was pretty weak at times. You know, he was a pacifist. He tried to like not get into fights with like other people or his enemies. But Ian was sort of like the action character, the one that's often like caught up in the most like fight scenes, often like fights other like antagonists pretty much. So that was pretty much what Ian was in a nutshell. He was like the action character. But after he and Barbara both left, Stephen Taylor pretty much kind of took over Ian's place as that kind of character. Then the third season comes around. After the third episode, third surreal, I'm sorry, I'm so used to calling it episodes. But after the third surreal of the third season, the Mythmakers, Vicky, left the series. And then the fourth surreal, the Daleks' Master Plan, which was like 12 episodes long. Holy crap, it was quite a long episode. But it introduced two companions that only lasted in that one episode under the name Katarina. I don't know if that's how her name is pronounced. And then Sarah Kingdom. Like I said, both of them were only in that episode pretty much, and yeah, kind of a little strange if you asked me. One of the few companions to only be in one episode. And then in the episode afterwards, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, a new companion came out under the name Dodo, I'm trying to remember her last name. Oh yeah, Chaplet. So she was sort of like on the show throughout the rest of the third season up until the finale, which was called The War Machines. And then Stephen Taylor continued up until the 9th surreal, The Savages, which was the one that takes place before The War Machines. So yeah, at this point, like all of the Doctor's companions from like the first two seasons are like no longer there with him. On the topic of the War Machines, not only was it Dodo's last episode, but it was also the first episode to introduce the first Doctor's final two companions, Ben and Polly. And those are the only appearances of the characters in the third season. And then the fourth season comes around, and the first two surreals happened, and those were the only episodes of the fourth season of Doctor Who to have the first Doctor in it. Because in his final episode, The 10th Planets, he regenerates into the second Doctor. And that's pretty much, for the most part, the end of our little discussion, our little story of the first Doctor. And I guess I might as well talk about some interesting stuff relating to classic Doctor Who. One thing you should keep in mind, in case the photographs in this video haven't told you already, but Doctor Who aired during a time where most TV shows were broadcasted in black and white, and Doctor Who during that time period was broadcasted in black and white. And not only that, around, the late 60s, as well as the 70s, the BBC, to make room for, other TV shows and other stuff on their channel, decided to wipe out copies of episodes of Doctor Who. And they kept doing it up until around 1978. And because of the whole wiping out copies of Doctor Who episodes, a good chunk of surreals from, the classic series, particularly the black and white episodes, are lost. And I think out of all the first Doctor's surreals, there were 29 different surreals starring the first Doctor, and only, I believe, 17 of them have been found, in their entirety. The other 12 have, missing episodes, whether it's one episode, 2 episodes, all the episodes, etc. And because there were 12 surreals from the first Doctor era that are lost in some fashion, they're not complete in their entirety, I was only able to see the 17 episodes that from the show that are found in their entirety, which goes like this: An Unearthly Child, The Daleks, The Edge of Destruction, The Keys of Marinus, The Aztecs, The Sensorites, Planet of the Giants, The Dalek Invasion of Earth, The Rescue, The Romans, The Web Planets, The Space Museum, The Chase, The Time Meddler, The Ark, The Gunfighters, and The War Machines. But yeah, those were the only episodes of the first Doctor era that I saw, and pretty much every other Doctor Who fan has seen. But hopefully the other 12 surreals will eventually be complete in their entirety. At this point, seeing that it's close to being the end of the 2010s, and the show's more than 50 years old, chances of that happening are a little bit slim, unfortunately, but there's always hope. I mean, I would talk about a story about a certain Doctor Who episode that got found a couple of years ago in its entirety, but I'm going to say that for the next time I'm talking about Doctor Who on this show. And also a bit of a fun fact, as I already mentioned, the episodes that have been found in their entirety, the 10th Planet, yes, the 10th Planet, the first Doctor's final episode, is considered a lost episode. Now, the entire episode is not lost. It was a 4-part surreal, and the first 3 parts have been found in their entirety, but part 4 is the only one that's missing, missing certain fragments here and there. So, because of part 4, the 10th Planet is incomplete / considered lost. And what's funny, episode 4 of the 10th Planet is considered the most sought-after lost episode of Doctor Who, because it was pretty much when the first Doctor gets regenerated into the second Doctor. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I gotta say about the William Hartnell first Doctor era. As for my thoughts on the episodes, now, normally, if you were a person nowadays watching something in black and white, especially if you're a younger person, it'll be a little bit hard to watch, and trust me, there were a couple times on the show that were, hard to watch. But the show, even back then, was interesting enough for me to want to watch more. And some of my personal favorite episodes, no particular order, from the Hartnell era, I think I can think of my top 3. Those would be the Dalek Invasion of Earth, the Web Planets, and the War Machines. Those are my personal 3 favorites from the Hartnell era. But yeah, I enjoyed watching the Hartnell era of Doctor Who, despite the fact that not all the episodes are found. But it was quite the watch, I'll tell you that. But yeah, for any of you guys who are watching this and, cannot stay awake during black and white shows, I would not suggest watching, these episodes of Doctor Who, but, if you guys are interested, feel free to give it a watch. I believe all the found episodes have been released on DVD. I think they're available on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken, so definitely check that out if you guys want to get started on Doctor Who. Is this the best series to start off with? I don't know yet. I haven't watched the entire show yet, so I'll be the judge of that as soon as this whole Doctor Who saga of mine continues onward. But anyways, that's about it for this episode of It Came From England. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more episodes and mediocre plush content in general. Leave me a comment down below telling me what you think. And that is about it. This is Tyler here from the Character Workshop, signing out. Next time, hopefully next time, unless it gets postponed, but next episode will be a special episode because I get to have somebody else be featured in this episode. That's right, this is going to be sort of a collab kind of video. It's like a Q&A styled episode. I'm going to be asking questions to them. They're going to be answering. It's not going to be live. It's going to be pre-recorded, but yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Like I said, no promises if it's going to be the next episode or not, but stay tuned.